Nuclear war has been avoided on all fronts for 70 years. It never came to pass. It can even be buried altogether. It isn't needed. It is in no one's interest. The nuclear war threats are part of a game of terror that is designed to divide humanity and pit it against one another with such intensity of fear that all the nations of the world are coerced by the death threats to surrender their sovereignty into the hands of an oligarchic deep state world empire and its governance, even to bow to depopulation, population control, economic control, thought control, and so on, in which no one is free. The nuclear war game has actually never really worked, though it has caused enormous damage in the world. Neither does the game need to be played. The nations of the world can refuse to perform the role of one another's enemy. Humanity has the power to shut down the terror game. This is totally possible. The shutdown will usher in an era of freedom, as the world has never seen. Freedom from a fire that almost no one would survive. The worldwide shutdown of it would be cause for a great celebration. Nevertheless, nuclear war is not the big issue in the world anymore. The big issue is the Ice Age challenge. In roughly 30 years, the long-awaited phase shift in the solar system's operational dynamics will occur that results in a 70% weaker sun. This obviously takes us back to the Ice Age climate, the glaciation climate that has been the normal climate on Earth for 85% of the last million years, which we have climate records of. That's the big issue in the world today. The Ice Age transition is near. The process towards it has already started. It is supported by multiple types of physical forensic evidence. The measured evidence and the historic records together point to enormously large consequences for our living that the universe has in store for us, which cannot be avoided. The Ice Age consequences are unavoidable, like the Ice Age itself. They are not a matter of choice. Only their effect on human living is a matter of choice, because the platform for human living can be uplifted to such an extent that civilization is able to continue, regardless of what the Ice Age brings with it. Nuclear war, in contrast, is completely avoidable. It is an issue of choice in every respect. An issue of choice can be avoided, be buried, be put out of the way. This liberation will be forced by the now larger issue, the issue of the Ice Age challenge. The issue is to be or not to be. Nuclear war is avoidable by simply shutting down what drives the madness. Do we hail the weapon, or do we hail our humanity? That's the critical question of the issue. The world can be healed of its destructive weapons madness by society re-evaluating its humanity. Whatever is not supremely valuable and is not inevitable by the force of an underlying principle can be laid aside. The world can be healed. Nuclear war falls into the category of an insanity that can be healed. It is a social disease. By humanity healing itself of it, nuclear weapons can be made obsolete overnight. This can be accomplished with a single profound right idea that advances human freedom. It is physically not a hard thing to scrap the nukes to avoid nuclear war by destroying all the nuclear weapons. No human being really wants them. Also, the nuclear weapons game is expensive to maintain. Each one of the more than 300 Titans of the type shown here has cost up to $350 million to build. All of them have already been retired and been replaced, and the replacements too have been retired and have been replaced again. There is a huge economic advantage associated with shutting the entire game down. And it will be shut down when greater urgencies become recognized that supersede the game. In comparison with nuclear war that can be avoided, the Earth becoming largely an ice planet again for the next 90,000 years cannot be avoided by any means that we possess. However, we can build the kind of world for us on this planet in which the Ice Age consequences won't affect our living. We can relocate everyone from the ice zones into the tropics and create cities there and new agricultures and industries that are unaffected by the ice and cold. With the aid of advanced technologies, a human civilization is well able to exist and flourish all the way through the next ice period and beyond, should humanity care to build the infrastructures for it. The task, of course, is not a small one. It is so enormous and so critical that it invariably obsoletes all lesser concerns, such as war, even nuclear war. The lesser things will simply fall by the wayside as unimportant, regardless of how hugely important and vital they presently appear. Nothing measures up to the task to assure our common physical survival that is not possible without large-scale technological infrastructures. For this, without which we cannot exist, the silly little games of war will surely be laid aside in the very near term. That's why I stated in the title that nuclear war is not the frontline issue, not anymore. It promises death. It promises universal annihilation. In an ice planet world, the issue is survival. That's the most critical issue before us. It is the biggest issue and really the only issue. Us meeting the Ice Age challenge if it is accepted, promises a renaissance that sweeps the nuclear war issue off the map. It offers life. It is the one big issue in the world. The issue is to be or not to be. For this we join hands across the world because in physical terms the challenge is enormous beyond what any nation by itself can accomplish. For humanity to be able to live on the Earth, when the Earth becomes virtually an ice planet, at the point of the phase shift to glaciation, which happens in the 2050s, requires building of enormously large infrastructures of a magnitude in scale that borders on the impossible, but which can be created. The magnitude of the Ice Age challenge is defined in this image in an overview fashion. The pink area comprises the tropics and subtropics that will remain free of permanent glaciation during Ice Age conditions. The blue areas define the potential extent of winter sea ice, and the areas from it to the poles represent the extent of summer sea ice and permanent glaciation in the adjacent lands. These glacial conditions result from a phase shift in the solar system's dynamics to a physical default state by which the sun's radiated energy becomes rapidly reduced to roughly 30% of the present level, most likely in less than a year, if not in months or weeks. As a result, the areas outside the pink zone becomes uninhabitable by the cold and by the lack of sunshine for agriculture. The uninhabitable areas include Canada, Europe, Russia, parts of China, India, and the USA. All populations living in these areas will need to relocate themselves into the tropics to be able to continue to exist. The land areas inside the pink zone will likewise become largely uninhabitable for a different reason. During glaciation conditions, under the weaker sun, the natural precipitation will diminish accordingly. Ice core samples from the Greenland ice sheet report 80% less precipitation for the time of the glaciation period. Without adequate rain or fresh water for irrigation, agriculture is impossible, and we do need agriculture to live. The ice-free land regions in the tropics will all lose their agriculture and become uninhabitable for the lack of fresh water, except for a few isolated areas associated with major rivers. This means that a worldwide freshwater distribution system spanning the oceans, fed by the world's biggest rivers, such as the Amazon and Congo rivers, which won't completely dry up, will be required to supply all of the ice-free parts of the continents with an artificial technological life support system. Without technological support for human living, our planet promises to become totally uninhabitable for the next 90,000 years after the 2050s, except for a few isolated places where a minuscule population density can be maintained with natural resources, such as near major rivers. The last ice age, when it ended, had yielded an estimated world population of only 1 to 10 million, a kind of default population level. Obviously, we want to do better this time, and we can. Our scientific and technological power is sufficient today to raise the survival rate all the way to 100% of the 7,000 million human beings that are living today. But will we do it? Is there enough love in our hearts for one another to make the effort? Will we lay our squabbles and bombs aside and build places for increased living? The answer depends on our willingness to ennoble ourselves to become more fully human in the highest sense. We face a task that is far from trivial. Just to relocate 6 billion people into the tropics, where little suitable land exists, requires new places for living and for agriculture to be placed afloat across the tropical seas. This means that 6,000 new cities will need to be built in less than 30 years, with brand new high-tech agriculture afloat on the seas, where it can be easily supplied with fresh water via deep ocean reverse osmosis desalination processes. The term huge is too small to describe the project, but all of this is possible. The materials exist, the energy resources exist, and the technologies exist. And above all, the human creative power exists for it to be done. Only the money doesn't exist. But who needs private money funding? Money doesn't build anything. Money is a hindrance. The new infrastructures and new cities can only be created in a monetarist free world, where the process itself of building is seen as an investment by society in itself to have a future. Nothing less than this grand approach will do. Definitely not monetarism, much less humanity's enslavement to it. To build the new world requires a new paradigm for living. Not a new humanity, but a richer sense of humanity, a richer awareness of what it already is and has and is able to accomplish. It requires cultural optimism built on grand achievements and honest science, with a vision for the future built on leading-edge pursuits.